Welcome to the Model Health Podcast. Today we're sharing some information that I'm really, really passionate about, and it's because it's what actually drives whatever results you'll ever achieve in your health and in your body. In fact, you can't have true health and fitness without this key component. It's utterly impossible. You know, a lot of times, well-meaning people, millions of them, set out on their new exercise program and they really, really believe that they're going to do it and they commit themselves. But several weeks down the road, life comes up, things change, and they don't find that they're staying committed to what they actually signed up for in the first place. Same thing with diet. You know, people will change their perception about the food they're going to eat, and they'll tell themselves, I'm not going to eat these foods anymore, I'm not going to eat this junk. And they find themselves in these situations where, you know, I had to do what I had to do, and the story starts to change. And you're going to understand why that is today in this podcast. Another big topic is, you know, people wanting to stop smoking and to stop drinking to improve their health. But they find themselves even a day, sometimes later on, not following through on what they committed to. And, you know, what people are seeing is that no matter what they seem to do, things keep coming up that derail their progress. And today I actually just posted up a quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer that says, "We don't attract what we want, we attract who we are." And it's really in that you'll find the answer. You know, it's not that the world is out to get you. It's that we're stuck in these habitual patterns that we have in our own minds. And we're attracting these situations to us. And we find ourselves in those places because that's the person we are. And we're trying to change our physical health and starting this new life process and working out and all these things. But we're bringing our old mental and emotional patterns with us to the new party. So we're bringing our old self to the new party. And it just doesn't fit in. So what we're going to do today is actually, I brought on a really, really special guest for you to help to make some sense of all this stuff and to get some insights on how to change your inner dialogue and to help you to get success more and more and to actually put it on automatic in our lives. And my special guest is Jonni LaForce. And she's a Board Certified Master Hypnotist as well as a Board Certified Hypnotherapist. She's a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, as well as being trained in various other modalities, including EFT and timeline therapy. She studied various behavioral models such as evolutionary psychology, behavioral economics, personality profiling, and she's actually treated over 52,000 people. So she's got a ton of experience with this stuff. And I thought it would be a really, really great fit to bring her on and help us to, like I said, make some sense of all this stuff. So Jonni, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's great to be here talking about this with you. It's one of my favorite subjects.
I bet. Well, what I like to do always is to just dive right in and get started. So the first question for you, and it's a really broad one, but why do you think that addressing our emotional health is such a key component in achieving the health that we want?
Well, I really have found from my own experience and the experiences of all those around me that emotions determine all of your behavior. They determine all of your actions. They determine the quality of your life, the meaning of life, ultimately. They're tied in not only to your very survival, but I believe I heard Tony Robbins even say the quality of your life is the quality of where you live emotionally. So I just feel that it matters in every way for anything you want to do, as well as being your highest leverage point. So if you wanted to change things instantly, you change the emotions, it changes the reality.
Wow. So it's really about changing you first and then seeing the outer world kind of replicating or presenting what you've done to change yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I mean, of course, we're starting to pull the veil back on this whole thing. Well, you know, it was really fascinating that you had mentioned to me a little bit of a study, and that's one of the things that really gets me about you is these little nuggets that I hear from you. And it was something about emotions and how it affects your blood sugar or something like that. Do you remember that?
I do. There's actually been some research that blew my mind when I discovered it that I think is hidden from most people. They aren't aware of this, and it's got such an impact, which is that they did a study where they took and tested people's blood sugar and then had them run through a basic emotion suppression exercise, which means, for instance, they'd have them watch movies that evoke specific emotions and they'd tell them not to show those emotions. And then they'd test their blood sugar afterwards, and they found that it lowered their blood sugar significantly. So that was whether they were suppressing thoughts or emotions, it did that, whether it was positive or negative. And basically, we're talking about anything that has to do with self-control or fighting or suppressing negative emotions also affected their immune system and the T cell counts, things like that.
Wow. Well, if, just in case people aren't realizing this, but your blood sugar has everything to do with whether or not you're carrying around a lot of visceral fat. And that's the stuff around the midsection. And understanding that, even in this particular study, proving that your emotions are actually driving and influencing how your blood sugar is going to be regulated in your system is incredibly profound. And it's one of those things that we really brush off. We really don't think that our emotions are a big deal, when in fact they are the deal. And I guess what I heard you say earlier, and just to come back again to this, is that we really can't even take an action without an emotion being present first. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Action follows emotion. It's, if you look at the structure of the brain and how it's changed over time with the reptilian brain, then the mammalian brain, and then the neocortex, the human brain, you find that emotions are at the seat. They're right there in the most basic level, and that's because they're completely tied to survival. So that's why you see emotions even in mammals, because they serve your most powerful movements. So the emotional brain is actually more streamlined. You respond quicker when using the emotional brain, and that's because it's completely tied into everything you need to survive. And then, of course, in the complex society we live in now, it's tied into all the higher levels of society too, such as community and connection and things like that.
Well, this is obvious. This is something that's really obvious once your attention is brought to it. But changing the emotions is one thing. Knowing that it's influencing things is one thing, but actually doing something to do something about it, to change it, is a whole different thing. And why is it that we don't or not able to proactively, well, it's not that we're not able to, I know that we're able to, why don't people change their emotions? Why don't they get out of what they're kind of stuck in? Is it something to do with, like, they're just comfortable in this? Why can't we do this?
Well, there's a few factors going on. Number one is that it's so integrated into the very fabric of our lives, we really take it for granted. And we don't think about it because a massive majority of our emotions are unconscious. For instance, you experience your emotions as coming up unbidden, right? You don't head out of the house and decide, oh, I'm going to get incredibly stressed on the road today, or I'm going to get incredibly annoyed and irritated with this person. It just happens. That means it's coming from your unconscious. So you've got that going on. The second thing is that we aren't taught anything about our emotions. We aren't taught how vital and important they are. And so we tend to fall into the least sophisticated way of manipulating our emotions, which is simply to fight or avoid them. And unfortunately, as you discover when you try to fight, avoid, and suppress emotions, you find that it doesn't work, and it's just a struggle, or you become dead. You're not really living and alive if you're spending all your time avoiding emotions. And it's also just such a complex web because emotions get stacked on top of emotions. So you're already having them even if you're avoiding them. And because of all these factors, it just becomes automatically something that we either don't deal with or just don't know how to deal with.
And this is pretty much across the board. I've had the privilege and the honor of working with thousands of people at this point. I lost track a while ago, and I wish I would have actually tracked to know the number. And I've seen this consistently. When people come in to work with me, the rudimentary stuff, the really foundational stuff as far as getting the health and fitness that you want, the technical stuff is so easy, it's absurd. But what I have to work with people on is getting them to the place where they're emotionally fit enough to do the stuff, So actually trying to get in there with them, along with them, because you can't actually change someone. It's helping them to make the changes within themselves. And it's just this inner technology. And I'm really glad that you brought up the fact that we're not taught this and how critical this is. And what has been your experience as far as teaching it? I mean, is there any really good examples of what you've been able to help somebody do?
Yeah, definitely. I've found that when you take someone and you bring them through multiple emotions, both good and bad, you end up with life-transforming moments that last forever. So, for instance, just to give a bit of an extreme example, I had the privilege of working with quite a few people who had some deep traumatic issues that they had been carrying around for decades. And it really affects every aspect of your behavior, your interpersonal connections, your limitations, what you're able to do, where you're able to go, and how you view yourself when you carry around, trauma. So, one of the things that I do differently than most therapists is I use the pain-pleasure associations that you have in your subconscious to affect automatic change quickly. And what that means is I'm willing to make a space for people to go through and move out of their pain. And I took one woman through an experience where she wanted to make a change in her health and fitness, and I took her through the experience of following her disorder, we'll call it, the problems that she had that she wanted to change, we'll call them disorder, following her disorder to its natural conclusion, which is her death. And I had her experience herself on her deathbed and having the person who loved her the most come in and have to hold her while she died and say goodbye, and then help her make a choice and go into pleasure and release that afterwards. So actually feel the emotion, sit with it, then release it and move into another one, which, by the way, is how emotions are supposed to be experienced. You're supposed to just move through them, not fight them, avoid them. And she came up to me afterwards with tears in her eyes, and she let me know she had been raped at 5 years old, and she was in her 60s, and she had carried that around forever. And it wasn't until that moment that she realized she was able to forgive her rapist. And after that, her friends commented on how her entire body language changed. She actually looked younger. She looked lighter. She didn't have these pain and stress and worry lines on her face. It was amazing, the physiological changes, and then, of course, the emotional changes. She was talking about how she'd never felt so light and free, and anyone who has carried an emotional burden knows the toll that takes on you and the relief when it's gone. So that's just one example. I'm
really, really glad that we're really going here with this information, because this is something that a tremendous amount of people are, on the surface, they'll pretend that there's nothing wrong. They haven't gone through really, really sensitive, really traumatic things. And when you suppress it, then it's as if it starts to eat away at you, and it's literally sabotaging so many different parts of your life. And a lot of times individuals aren't really understanding that that's what's going on. And I'm saying this from personal experience as well, just not knowing these things were there, from our particular environment as a child. We really learn all these different behavior patterns as a child in these different states that we're in. And I think it's we're in a different mental state. Is that correct? Like a theta or something like that when we're younger?
Right. The way to look at it is, it's like children are basically in hypnosis all the time. Because you have a lot of parts of your brain system and cognitive functioning that haven't actually come online yet. The barriers, if you will, between conscious and unconscious aren't there. So things go directly to the unconscious. As you know, the unconscious is the foundation that drives all your behavior. So in other words, everything goes directly in and affects how you behave from then on. It determines the structure that your behavior will stem from.
Interesting.
And this woman, she didn't even know that trauma that was laid down at that time and all the responses to it and all the emotions carried with it were affecting her health and fitness levels.
Right. Right. And this is for everyone. This is for people to understand. Even if it was, maybe a parent or somebody you respected said a comment to you when you were a child, or maybe you had an interaction with a bully or somebody who might have, made you feel less than at some point in your life. Or it can be something that's seemingly positive where you're really pushed, to an extreme to be able to perform and to do all these things. And that's caused you to kind of fight back against that. There's so many different things here, and we're not really getting to the root of why can't we make the changes that we need. And it's because we don't have this technology in our hands. It's there. It's built into us, but we don't really have the instruction manual, and that's why I'm so glad that you're here to talk about this stuff. Something that you mentioned was the pain-pleasure principle, and I have to say, again, from experience in working with all the people I've been able to work with, this you said it right on the money. We haven't talked about this before, but that's what I've seen over and over again. It's when you're able to go through the painful and the pleasurable stuff together, and that creates the greatest change. That creates that long-term instant click where life is never the same anymore because you're being willing to move through those uncomfortable emotions. And as you said, was that, we really need to roll through the emotions for them to just kind of roll by us. But what we do in our society is we attach to these emotions. We latch onto them like a vice grip, like a little monster, and we really become it rather than allowing ourselves to be flexible and to be able to change. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. That is exactly it right there. What you said about being able to move through them, being able to move through pain and move into pleasure, that is the most powerful thing that anyone can learn. The reason why is basically what I found is after, treating thousands and thousands of people, is there is a pattern, and that is that people fall into three groups. The first group are people who completely avoid, suppress, fight, and even look down on emotions. And that could just be the way you're raised. You might be raised that showing emotions is weak or uncomfortable, confrontational, something like that. The second group appears to be at the mercy of their emotions. They appear like they're stuck in their emotions. And then the third group, which is the much smaller group, sadly, are people who use, work with, and honor emotions. And when you can move through pain, when you can experience it, be with it, and move out of it, those three things, all of a sudden your behavioral flexibility is enormous. What does behavioral flexibility mean? Well, let me put it this way. Human beings will do anything to get back inside their emotional comfort zone. So once you're outside of your emotional comfort zone, you will do anything to get back inside your emotional comfort zone. Now, on a evolutionary level, which we would say basic survival level, that looks like when your life is physically threatened, you have massive fear and or rage. Those are the two things that are made to help you survive. If you're in fear and rage, you will do everything to get out of it, and that's what makes you survive. When you're physically threatened, if you didn't have those emotions, you would just let yourself be killed. You literally would have no reason to take action. That's how vital your emotions are. Now, on a much higher, more complex level, if you are able to sit with and experience pain as well as pleasurable emotions, you are able to push yourself beyond anything that you have experienced before. So what that means is, let's say you have a relationship with someone. It could be a teenager, it could be a spouse, it could be a coworker. If they are having emotions that make you uncomfortable, whether it's positive emotions, because we do tend to get uncomfortable if somebody's too excited or too happy, right? We say, oh, calm down, don't get your hopes up. Or if they're upset, irritated, defensive, jealous, any of those feelings, that also makes us uncomfortable. We're either going to avoid them and run away and shut them down, or start mirroring them back and fighting with them if we cannot be outside of our emotional comfort zone, if we don't have behavioral flexibility. If we're able to stay in that, we can be a space for them, and we begin handling relationships extremely smoothly. We begin being able to show understanding. Remember, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, seek first to understand and then be understood. And that is an extremely powerful key if you want to be a leader or a nurturer or an achiever. And then on top of that, we're able to guide ourselves into new ways of attracting, because we can begin to clear out the things that we've been holding on to or hiding from that have been changing the very fabric of the results that we get.
Wow. Well, Jonni, I want everybody to just take a moment and just kind of personally take a note of yourself, or what's going on internally, and just note, which group are you in generally? Are you in that first group who were kind of programmed to believe that to show your emotions is weakness? Are you in the second group to where you're stuck, where you have certain emotions that you're stuck in? You have a behavioral pattern of anger. You go there. You are this individual who lives in that. You're stuck there. Or are you in the third group where you use and you work with your emotions? You become them and then you let them go. I'm assuming Jonni was breaking it down that level. And this is a very much more advanced level of being. And what I really want to go back to, so just take note of that first of all. Where are you at? And then what I want to go back to really briefly was just to reiterate the fact that Jonni mentioned when we're a child, we're basically in a hypnotic state. And this is, we have these different brain states that we're in, the theta state, the delta state, and all these different things. But what's really important is understanding that it's, I think it's before the age of about 5 to 7 is when it's really, really crucial. And whatever you are exposed to, you believe it. And it becomes your blueprint for reality. So I want to say that, number one, to be more conscientious about your children, about the children that you're around and how influential they are, and helping to create a great template for them, because this is when it's all really going down. And secondly, to understand that, yes, your template might have been created in a way that you're not particularly happy about, but that doesn't mean that it can't change. That doesn't have the right say or the last say in who you are. You can change these things. It's just understanding our inner technology and understanding even what we've gone through already. Just being able to take a step back and look at, like, wow, that's me. I am somebody who's kind of stuck in my emotional patterns. Oh, I was taught that showing my emotions was a weakness, or I was taught that not necessarily that it's a weakness, but it's just something that you just don't do. You just don't do that. And you can start to see how this might be impacting your relationships, and your relationships ultimately impacting your overall health. It's a very, very important thing. So thanks for sharing that, Jonni. And now what I want to go to is something else that you mentioned, and to get some more clarity, or just get a little bit more in depth about it. You mentioned that you took that particular woman through a visualization process, and it was a painful and at the same time very freeing visualization process. Now, most times we're told to visualize ourselves succeeding. All right? Mm-hmm. How does that really stack up?
Well, there's been some really fascinating research that's been going on for actually several years. And they found that when you're visualizing positive, let's call it the new you, okay? Because whether you're visualizing yourself with a dream job or a skinny body or a perfect lover or in that a perfect house. You're basically, it's a new thing in your life that you're visualizing. So we'll call it the new you. So they found that people who do exercises visualizing the new you actually are less likely to succeed. It's pretty shocking. So, for instance, they took a group of students and they had one group visualize doing especially well on the exams, and then one group just visualized what they were doing every day. That's the control group. And they found that even though it was only a few minutes that the visualization exercises lasted, the students actually studied less and made lower grades on the exam. And then they did it over again. They took some women who wanted to lose weight, and they had them imagine that they were going to be put in a situation where they would be tempted to do things that did not promote weight loss. So, for example, imagine you're at a party and there's pizza and cake and ice cream, and they said, how would you behave? And the women who imagine themselves behaving in a negative way, for instance, I would be straight in there consuming as much pizza and ice cream as I could, my portion and other people's portion, was one group. Then the other group was women who visualized themselves, imagined themselves being really great, staying away from all that, just having water. And they found, after they tracked these women for a year, that the ones who had positive fantasies, who visualized themselves doing really well, actually lost, on average, 26 pounds less than those who had negative fantasies.
Wow,
so the ones who imagine themselves failing or having a hard time lost more weight than the ones who imagine themselves doing great. They even did that.
That's fascinating.
It's to me, it's crazy when I discover this stuff, especially because I have to admit that I've spent a lot of time visualizing the new me. I mean, I started, working towards achievement and success and reading every book I could get my hands on when I was 16. And I thought that this was a really important part of it. I thought that this was a really powerful exercise. Now, there are powerful exercises that you can do that are just slightly different on this, that actually work with the unconscious, work with the emotions, and will give you the success that they've proven over and over again. But when you just visualize something positive, like in any example, I mean, they even took students who had a crush on a fellow classmate and had them imagine they were alone. Like they showed up early for the class and so did the object of their crush, and had them imagine, what would it play out. And those who imagined a really positive scenario, like they went up and talked to the person and ended up walking away holding hands, or versus the ones who imagined that they just froze and couldn't talk at all and nothing happened. The ones who imagined something positive, far less likely to ever have talked to the object of their crush by the end of the semester. I mean, every example that they did, students imagining, had them visualize getting a really higher paying job, or just not fantasizing that. And the people who fantasized about getting their dream job after graduating college, after a 2-year follow-up, so they really tracked this in depth. They found the students who reported frequently fantasizing about success submitted fewer job applications, received a lower number of job offers, and commanded significantly smaller salaries. So this affects your love life, your connection, your relationships. It affects your finances, your jobs. It affects your studies and learning. It affects your health and weight loss, every single area.
Wow. Well, what do you have to say to teachers like Dennis Waitley, who are telling you to visualize, and working with Olympic athletes and all these things? There has to be some balance here, because what you're saying I know is actually true, but what's the discernment here? Why is it like this? And we got other people over here, who are visualizing and succeeding seemingly.
Yes. Okay. So very great question, because that's the most important distinction. That's the trick. Why does one thing seem to work when the other one doesn't? And here's what's going on. They had a third group of students. Remember, they asked one group of students to visualize themselves succeeding on the exam, getting high scores. The other group just visualized their everyday processes. That was the control group. Well, they had a third group, and they had that group of students imagine themselves doing the process, so the how of achieving their goal. So, for instance, visualizing when, where, and how they study. And that group of students who imagine themselves they visualize themselves going through the process of studying, they spent significantly more time revising, and they eventually earned higher exam grades. So it's the same with athletes. Athletes who visualize themselves training, golfers who imagine themselves playing and hitting that stroke over and over again, or tennis players, all of that, they actually end up winning more frequently and performing much better. So it's about visualizing the how, which is a little counterintuitive, because one of the things that we're told often is don't worry about the how if you have a big enough why. Well, that's not 100% true. You know, you do need the big enough why, because it gets your emotions engaged, and then those drive you forward. But then you have to be ready to deal with all the emotions that pop up, which is where the how is. Because if you start getting involved in something and then you're like frustrated, or it's too painful in one way or another, is because it's not what you feel like doing in the moment, or there isn't instant gratification, or it's just outside your comfort zone, physically uncomfortable, something like that, you know, that's when you're going to just slip back, try to get back in your emotional comfort zone. You're going to stop doing what you planned on doing. But if you've been imagining and visualizing yourself facing the how, if you have the tools needed to stay in and move through the uncomfortable or negative emotions and leverage those back into the positive emotions, bam, you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed faster than you ever did before, and much easier and more automatically. So that's the difference. Why athletes using visualization techniques, and astronauts did the same thing. It's because of what they're visualizing. So the most powerful thing you can do, here's a tip, is visualize yourself succeeding, and then visualize yourself facing an obstacle. So what can go wrong? Imagine yourself facing that and quote unquote suffering through that, and imagine yourself succeeding. Do those two things together, pow, hugely powerful. You just reprogrammed your brain.
Wow. You just blew me away, because that is so right on the money on how this stuff works, because it's more tactical, it's more tangible, real. It's not just foo-foo. I see myself with this, you know, super sexy body, and I'm getting into my whatever kind of fancy automobile you're into. You're not just living in this fantasy land and sipping on a Mai Tai and all this stuff. You're looking at what are the steps, what are the actual physical, tangible things, the how-to, and that's really how stuff happens, is actually going through that process. And then on another level is, you know, looking at, obviously, especially when you're getting out of your mental blueprint about how reality is supposed to be, you're going to be faced with things. You're going to be faced with challenges. And most people are not prepared for this because they never even consider it. They have this idea when they set out to change their body that they're just going to go. They're just going to do it. They signed up at the gym, and they're going to not really just taking a moment to see, like, what do I do when my car breaks down? What happens in that situation when I need to go to the gym? It's my day to do my thing, and my car breaks down, or whatever might happen, or somebody can't watch my kids, or what do I do? You know, start the planning actual steps and seeing it happen, and seeing the outcome that you don't necessarily want coming up. Tremendously valuable. That's worth the whole thing in and of itself. Well, if there's anything else to add to that, Jonni, please do. But other than that, just talk about how this is like a really complex system that we're dealing with here, because it's not just that we just can do the stuff. This is pretty complicated. And then if you can share anything, any kind of resources that you have for people to be able to connect with your work and to be able to do some of the stuff we're talking about.
Okay, so just to let you know how complex this is, one of the things that you're dealing with is the part of the brain, the amygdala and hypothalamus, that is completely tied into memory and learning. So there's two parts of your brain that really deal with emotions, which is the neocortex, that's your higher processing of emotions, and then your more quick, more powerful, more basic emotions are handled by the amygdala and the hypothalamus. So let me repeat that. The part of your brain that handles your most intense, most powerful emotions is the part of your brain that handles all memory and learning. In other words, everything you know, which is what's going to decide everything you do and experience, is completely tied into your emotions. Now, that's going to be a really powerful trigger that is totally in your unconscious. So it's going to seem like you have these old patterns that you just don't have control over, and that's one of the things that makes it completely complex. Now, there's all kinds of things you can do to work with that and to really use it and to gain that control. The other part is your neocortex. So, for instance, people, by the way, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, people who had damage to those parts of their brain couldn't recognize their families, couldn't recognize their loved ones. They looked like strangers to them. And that's because your emotions are tied into your memory and learning, and you don't even know, who's familiar and who's a stranger if you don't have the history of the emotional relationship. Also, people who had damage to their emotions, they actually couldn't even make a basic decision about what shirt to wear or what to eat for lunch. If you have no emotions, there's no priority. For instance, you can't even work something out logically because logic is not even something that you hold as good or right or awesome, because those all have to do with how you feel about it. Then the other thing is one emotion will trigger another emotion, which will trigger another emotion, and that'll become an automatic program where if you just begin to feel the first emotion, you'll immediately jump to the third emotion that had triggered it. So just to give a quick example, let's say that you have some shame around the way your body looks. And so you put on some workout clothes, because you want to go to the gym and start working out, and you catch sight in the mirror and you immediately feel ashamed. And then that makes you feel depressed. And being depressed makes you feel like, stressed, because now you still have to leave the house and you're tired. Because depression has made you tired, and so you're just stressed because you have this huge list of things that you have to go do, but you're too tired and depressed to go do them because you're too ashamed. So it's very difficult to even get yourself to go do anything now. All you experience is yourself feeling stressed, but what you're feeling is stress about your depression, about your shame. And so it becomes an automatic program. The second you start to feel a little ashamed when you catch sight of yourself in the mirror, you immediately feel super stressed. You just skip all through the steps. Now, if you go to work on the stress, you're going to end up in the depression and the shame, or the shame. It's not going to fix all those. If you go to work on the depression, you're still going to have trouble with the shame. And if you go to work on the shame, you're going to zoom right through back to the stress. So because it's a web, it becomes automatically connected in your brain. Your brain's almost hardwired for it. You have to know exactly how to untangle that web. There is a technique that I have, which is about using a positive emotion to wrap around all of those. So that's a cheat code that you can use that will automatically change all three of those quickly, solve the problem, and move you through it. The other thing is, if you have a tool that allows you to know that you're going to get immediate expression and then relief of any negative emotion, you no longer have the fear of the negative emotion or the resistance to the negative emotion. So just to give you a quick example, if you know that driving over a bridge makes you really anxious, you're going to avoid driving over the bridge whenever there's a route around it. If you know that being around people who display a certain type of behavior makes you uncomfortable, you're going to avoid being around those people. if you know that you have something that's going to quickly turn off that anxiety, turn off that discomfort, whatever it is, you aren't going to put very much energy into avoiding those things. And now your world just opened up. So I just, myself, what I did is I just took a list of the 10 most common painful emotions that people are either doing everything they can to avoid or completely stuck in without wanting to be. So for instance, anger, loneliness, depression, fear, those types of things. I took all of those and I put together hypnotic audio, which uses binaural beats and harmonic wave frequencies also to increase the theta state in the brain. Remember, theta is associated with the deepest levels of meditation, as well as in clinical research, it's shown to be a perfect state for super learning. So really reprogramming the brain in a way that's permanent and automatic. And I just put together a series of audios that helps people move out of those specific emotions into positive emotions that are more resourceful. What this means is, and this is the key part, this is the part that I really want everyone to get. It means you don't avoid or be stuck in the negative emotions. Now you can go through life experiencing the rich tapestry of every level of the spectrum of experience, because it's all determined by emotions. Remember, there's over 4,000 feeling words in the English language. There's a reason that there's over 4,000 feeling words, because our lives are supposed to be that rich. You don't have to avoid those anymore, because now you have a way to move through them quickly and effortlessly. You don't have to worry about getting stuck in them, and you also begin to understand them in others, which gives you an ability to coach better, to lead better, and to nurture better. One last thing, just to really impress upon you, really quick, Shawn, I just really want to impress upon people how powerful this is. Just going back to the psychobiology of the brain really quick, they actually can show that when people have, let's talk about just really quick, when people do what's called a crime of passion, that's when they kill someone, or attack someone in the moment. It's not premeditated, right? So they fly off the handle into a rage, like let's say road rage, when somebody pulls over and starts beating somebody or kills them, or they get into a jealous fit and they kill somebody. We can prove that what's happening is it's called an emotional hijacking. Their amygdala actually takes over all processing and shuts down processing to the neocortex. Your neocortex is where you do higher level logical thinking, etc. It actually shuts that down. And it's like they black out in a way. They don't black out technically because they remember everything, but they say they see a red haze. They say they feel like their head exploded, that type of thing. And it's because that's what's occurring. Their emotions actually shut down their higher processing. They don't have the ability to think about things and think them through and see consequences. So that's just an extreme example of what is occurring constantly at a much lower level, which is that your emotions are completely controlling your behavior. Wow. So that's how important this is.
They're basically hijacking us all the time when we want to do something good for ourselves. That, kind of more prehistoric parts of our brains will kind of take over, and next thing you know, we're eating a Twinkie. But so what we're going to do is we're going to put a link to get access to that product right below this podcast. So it's going to be there for everybody to get their hands on it. And is there anything else to share with it, Jonni?
Yes. The last thing that I want to say is there's two things. One, there was a woman she worked with. She worked in a hospice type setting with people who were dying for years and years, and she asked the people before they died to write down their list of regrets. And she compiled out of the hundreds of responses over the years and years she worked with dying people a list of the top 5 regrets people had on their deathbed. And the number 3 regret was they wish they'd expressed their emotions more. So this is going to affect you powerfully up until the end. And ultimately, a final tip when it absolutely comes down to it, and you have all these feelings that you need to deal with, or that the world seems to be on your shoulders, or you are in level of frustration, loneliness, anger, depression, anxiety, stress, any of those, sometimes you just have to dance it out.
Well, on that note, Jonni, thank you so much. Phenomenal information. And everybody just really take note that your emotional fitness is what's going to fuel your physical fitness and your physical health, as well as the people around you. You know, it's really getting ourselves mastered first so that we can do the things that we need to do. And from there, we can be of greater service to the people around us. We'll be the walking, talking image of these things. But we've got to get our inner game dialed in first. We've got to get our emotional fitness dialed in first, because that's actually what's driving the vehicle. So thanks again for tuning in. This is Shawn Stevenson signing off, and I wish you all the best.